Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode in the series, The Cross Questioned. And now we are moving on to looking at the aspect that is spoken about in Matthew chapter 27, verse 24, where we have this strange incident taking place, where we have Pilate washing his hands. Now most of you are going to think, well, there's nothing strange about washing your hands. In this specific incident, there is something strange. So Matthew chapter 27, verse 24 talks about how he took water, how Pilate saw everything that was taking place, realized there's nothing he could do. So he took water and he washed his hands before the multitude, and he said to them, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. So this is the story that we are told in the book of Matthew. So this is reported only by Matthew. The other writers don't report this incident. There is no historical record that Romans had at any time appointed this as a practice. Nor do we find this practice being recorded after Jesus, maybe as people thought, well, maybe this is a good thing to do. There is no historical record that the Romans had at any time adopted this practice that was only used amongst the Jews. Matthew, writing for the Jewish Christian audience, seemed to be garnishing his narration by writing this in. So let us leave this matter for another time and move on, because it's not a huge, serious issue, but it is an issue that needs to be commented on. What about the text that we read in Matthew chapter 27, verse 37? Where it says that they set above his head a sign that was written on that said, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." There again, just like with the washing of the hands, there is no record of such an incident ever taking place before or after. About writing on your victims, even in Roman customs, we don't find that they put a sign above their victims' heads like we see so popular in Christian culture today. We always see that crucifixion scene, and you'll see a sign written above it that says, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Even those two criminals or those two thieves or whoever they were who were crucified on either side of Jesus, we have no comment or suggestion that there was something written above their heads by any of the writers. Now John writes a lot later when he's writing his version of this account, and he of course tries to improve upon perhaps maybe the mistake that the others had written when they wrote this. So the way he improves it is that he claims in John chapter 19, and it's quite a long piece of dialogue, because remember, John likes to exaggerate or draw very, very simple concepts out. He likes to paint long, flowery pictures of everything that takes place. And so in John chapter 19, you can read it from verse 18 to 22. And it says, "They crucified him and two others with him on either side, and Jesus in the middle. And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross. And he wrote it saying, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. This title then read many of the Jews, and they saw this and were upset. And so it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. And they said to the chief priests and the Jews, to Pilate, you should have written the alleged King of the Jews. Or they say he is the King of the Jews, not say that he is the King of the Jews. And Pilate said, what is written is written." So this is sort of paraphrased of what you will find there. So the main thing is that what we get from this text in John chapter 19 is that it was written in three languages. It was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. And the Jews were upset because they said, you shouldn't have written, I am the King of the Jews. You should have written, he said, or alleged that he's the King of the Jews. So let us put aside the differences in the quotations of Matthew and John. Now what is perplexing here is what was declared in the story. So if we read the story itself and what we hear in the story, is that they say that there were three different languages that it was written in. The story that we read, after we hear Pilate washing his hand of this whole story, which is perplexing on its own because we don't know why this happened. We never see this happen before. It was a Jewish practice, but not a Roman practice. So after washing his hands of this innocent man's blood, we still see that somehow after his warnings, after all the problems that he sees with the innocence of Jesus, he still somehow decides, you know what, I think I'm going to write a sign and put it in 3 languages. The most important issue that we're having to deal with in this search, as far as I'm concerned, is the time factor. We all know Sheikh Ahmad Didat's issue dealing with time, whether it was 3 days, whether it was a day and a half, whether it was a day and 2 nights. But there are bigger time factors that I see to be a problem than simply how many days we are looking at. In fact, what is greater and more interesting to me is what we find dealing with the hours more than the days. Now, according to Mark and Matthew and John, Jesus was brought to the Roman governor's court early in the morning. But if the trial by the Jewish court took place after daybreak in Luke chapter 22 verse 66, then Jesus could not have been taken to the court until later in the morning. Pilate must have taken some time to come out in his proper robes and his clothing and at least put some type of clothing on to hear this grievous complaint or a formal complaint. The drama of the trial, the mockery, the flogging, the trip to Herod's palace and back again, the march to Golgotha, along outside the city on the way to where Jesus was going to be crucified, the preparation for the crucifixion of the 3 condemned persons, including Jesus himself and the 2 robbers. All of this must have consumed many hours. It's not something that could have happened in 15 minutes or 20 minutes or even 2 hours or 3 hours. It's traveling backwards and forwards. It's flogging. It's mockery. It's the trial. It's moving between 2 courts. It's carrying a heavy cross, allegedly, up to Golgotha. It's writing a sign. It's giving vinegar to Jesus. It's stabbing him in his side. There's a whole dialogue that took place. It's not something that happened very quickly. So it is therefore doubtful if the hour of the crucifixion was 9 o'clock in the morning. So we've got a very, very short period of time. As it says in Mark chapter 15, verse 25, it says it was 9. Now Matthew and Luke, who have otherwise borrowed heavily from Mark, also do not endorse this idea. And so they have a difference in time as well. John is too busy making Pilate go in and out of his headquarters, carrying out discussions with Jesus and then going to the prosecutors to be bothered with exact times. With all this activity, Jesus, as far as he is concerned, he is too busy with these instances to be worried about exact time. But we do hear him when he is talking, when he does mention it in John chapter 19, verse 14. He says that it was noon when Pilate gave the order for the crucifixion. So it took place around about that time, later in the afternoon. So at about noon. The 3 synoptic gospels, they all agree that darkness fell over the whole land at about midday and lasted until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we have that in John and in the synoptic gospels, they have the time being around noon, and that it was 3 hours later in the afternoon when everything came to an end. So John does not support this, however, in his version. He's slightly different to the ending, how the ending takes place. Whenever the sequence of things or the actual timetable are given in Christianity, you can be sure that when the mathematics or numbers are concerned, that you're going to find problems. It was not earlier than 3 in the afternoon when Jesus is stated to have said, "I thirst," and was given wine or vinegar or whatever it was to drink, and then he breathed his last and he died. This you can read in John chapter 19, verse 28 to 30. So the total time between being put on the cross and dying is less than 3, or no more than 5.5 hours, according to the narratives that you can read for yourself. But most likely it was probably less than 3 hours, if we accept John's inspired version of how this all took place. Let's take a break, and when we get back from the break, we will continue, inshallah.
Pearls of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Narrated Areeb bin Hatim, may Allah be pleased with him. The Prophet, may peace be upon him, said, O people, save yourselves from the hellfire, even if with 1/2 of a date fruit given in charity. And if this is not available, then save yourselves by saying a good, pleasant, friendly word. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 8, Book of Good Manners, Hadith number 6023.
Their advice,
who was raised under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah.
their guidance,
Their foundation is based on the Quran and the teaching of the Messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
their example.
When the sun is above the heads of the people,
Sayyid Raghi,
this young man or young lady, on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, they will be under that shade, the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
going in the divine direction, blessing of Allah, the world of Muslim youth. Every Friday at 3:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 2 a.m. Saudi Arabia on Peace TV. Dialogue. Discussion. Debate. Rebuttal. Conclusion.
Eliminate misconceptions about religion. Get enlightened.
Witness Dr. Zakir Naik in a battle of words in Crossfire every Friday at 8:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 10 a.m. Saudi Arabia on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. We are continuing with our look at the cross questioned. Before the break, we were looking at time. Time is important. You know, often when we look at the issue of the crucifixion and the resurrection and the burial, we look at the days. But I've realized sometimes we need to look at the smaller things, and we'll probably find more interesting things there. So we've said that the total amount of time between being put on the cross and dying is less than 3 hours, or no more than 5.5 hours if we calculate it according to the different narratives that are given. Most likely it was less than 3 hours if we accept John's inspired words. Could Jesus have died in such a short time while the other 2 victims were still alive, and even later they lived until the evening? How do we know this? How do we know that they lived till the evening? Because the soldiers came along and they broke their legs. So Christian apologists are faced with a glaring problem on how to explain the difference between the time in the various Gospels. Now, to be fair, we should have a look at how they would try to explain this situation to us. And to be fair to them, we should try to examine what these apologists have to say. Perhaps their theory will clear up some of the issues that we have with time, because maybe we are not understanding it the same way as perhaps those people at that time understood time to be. Maybe time in Christian time is not the same as in Jewish time. Maybe Jewish time is not the same as Muslim time. So we owe it to the apologist to perhaps give us an explanation of how time actually works. So there's a quote that I read, and this is how it goes. There are 2 possible solutions which carry reasonable weight. One solution centers on the word about in John's Gospel, or in his statement of time. In John's Gospel it says, and it was about the 3rd hour. Okay, for example. He leaves that it is not exactly the 6th hour when John says it, but about the 6th hour. So the apologist is saying to us here that when John is speaking, John is saying that it was not exactly the 6th hour, but about the 6th hour this time. The apologist continues to say, also Mark's account does not force us to believe that it was exactly 9 a.m. when Jesus was put on the cross. The apologist continues to say that another possibility is that John is using a different method of reckoning time than Mark is. The apologist continues to say, we know for a fact that in other times, the Romans calculated the civil day from midday, just as we do today. Thus, John's 6th hour might make 6 a.m. a time that may be later than that, not exactly 6 a.m. So John's 6th hour would make it 6 a.m. at the time of the last of the trials of Jesus and his sentencing, giving the time to lead us of his crucifixion from that period on, as Mark gives us, from 6 a.m. or afterwards. Not exactly 6 a.m., not exactly 9 o'clock, not exactly 3 o'clock, but about. And this we can find, strangely enough, trying to be explained by Josh McDowell in his book, Answering Tough Questions. Now, were you lost a bit? Well, me too. It is interesting that even the apologists find it a tough question. Their book is called Tough Questions Answered. And they also admit that in their book that it is indeed a difficult question to answer. That's what they say in their book. But then they go on to answering it. It seems difficult to decide which of these solutions must be accepted, or both of them should be accepted, as we are looking at today here in the 21st century. How are we supposed to look at it? The first solution says that we must understand it by the word about. And the solution is about how we should understand this text. Well, about is about as far as I can go. Because we find that it is very, very far-fetched, since it would mean that both Mark and John were making wild accusations or wild approximations about time. Instead of saying, well, we don't know the time, according to the apologist theory, they are just making wild assumptions of time, not acceptable to any reasonable scholar as far as I am concerned. If you say it was about 3 o'clock and someone says it was about 9 o'clock, they are about not the same. Of course, we should be aware that when Mark says 9 a.m. and John says 6 hours, they are not reckoning time in the same way we do today, according to the apologists. So they would say that if Mark says it's 9 o'clock and John says it's 6 o'clock, then it should be about. So you could say it was about 9:10 a.m. or 6:20 p.m. and so on. So this would be giving a few minutes here or there, about 15 minutes on either side. So in modern jargon, we would give it about 15 minutes or so when we are talking. So 9 a.m. could reasonably be accepted if we apply the apologist theory. 9 a.m. could either be 8:45 or it could be 9:15. That gives a whole half an hour for the about. And the 6th hour could be 5:45 to 6:15, giving them another whole half an hour of about. Even if we allow this margin for error and couple it by a few extra minutes, we are still left with a problem. We can look further into this issue and we see that they have a huge problem in their counting. But we can never consider 9 a.m. to be about the 6th hour. We can never. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not a few minutes. It's not about. It's a big difference in time. It doesn't look the same. It's about time. Christians realize that you cannot pull the wool over people's eyes. As for the second solution, we must realize that John, when he is talking, he is trying to make himself look as the beloved disciple. So when he is talking about himself, obviously he is going to push himself into the limelight when he's talking. So he is a thoroughbred Jew. John is a thoroughbred Jew. He's brought up in the traditions of the Jews. He reckons the morning as a Jew would reckon the mornings. He doesn't follow the Roman style of looking at time. You see, we as Muslims and those who are Jews, we see the Sabbath starting when the sun goes down on a Friday, and when it goes down on a Saturday, that's the end of the Sabbath. We work on those times. We don't work according to the Roman calendar. We have Hajj at a different time. We have Ramadan at a different time. We follow a different calendar to the rest of society. The Jews have always followed this. John is not a Roman. He is a Jew. So the second solution of trying to claim that the Romans work it out from midday and so on is not holding water. Again, do not try to pull the wool over our eyes. We know he was a Jew. He followed it and reckoned it according to the Jewish calendar. So we know that he was not running it at a different time zone. I know this can be a little bit confusing, but the biggest problem that Christians have, they should be looking at not so much whether we should be looking at a Jewish time or Roman time, but the difference between the two versions on the time that things were supposed to have taken place. If he is the same Mark that we find who is writing the New Testament, we find that even in Mark's version, he reckons time the same as we find John reckoning it. So they were both from Judea and Samaria. Both of them have time in exactly the same. They both see time in exactly the same way. So if they both reckoning it at the same time, we find somebody else reckoning it in a different way, that means somebody else is misunderstanding when the crucifixion actually took place. If he is the same Mark who was the nephew of Barnabas, and about whose conduct Paul fell off with Barnabas, then Mark was from Cyprus. It would be further interesting to consider that if Mark has also begun reckoning time the same, then these two people from vast different places are reckoning it in the same way. Look at Mark chapter 15, verse 25. And it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him. It would mean that Jesus was secretly crucified not long after midnight or much before daybreak, if we're going to translate what the apologists are saying and follow the Roman style of doing time. If that's the case, Jesus was crucified at midnight, or maybe just 3 o'clock in the morning or somewhere around there. So this creates even a greater problem for the Christians now. So time and this experiment of trying to twist and manipulate and move time from here to there, no, it's not really the 3rd hour. The 3rd hour is actually calculated from midday. All these things are just there to confuse you. It also seems rather odd that Pilate will give into some type of midnight trial and execution in his court. For people who try to manipulate this time zone and look at it and try to get out of it by giving these theories, it is not feasible. So, in fact, it goes against what you'll find in the rest of the explanations as given in Luke, where he talks about as soon as it was day, the trial of Jesus was started in the Jewish court. That throws the whole thing out, because if you add that verse in, and that's found in chapter 23, verse 56, then you have even greater problems to deal with. So the main issue here is that it's not logical. The 6th hour means the 6th hour, noon means noon, 3 means 3, and that's just how it's going to have to be. So we've run out of time again, so make sure you join in again next time, inshallah. So for me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.